Hey everyone, my name is JJ Paulson. I'm a student entrepreneur and co-founder of the tech startup Perch. I want to invite you for coffee and conversation on our weekly series, Coffee Talks. We're here to showcase the heartbeat of Gainesville's entrepreneurial spirit. I want to give a quick thank you as this series is made possible by Afternoon Roasting and Seven Ashes Productions. So grab your favorite mug, settle in, and let's explore the exciting world of entrepreneurship together. Now let's meet this week's guest. How we doing, everyone? JJ Paulson, we're back with another Coffee Talks. Before we get going, just want to give a special thanks to Seven Ashes Productions and Afternoon Roasting for making all of these Coffee Talks possible. So joining us today is Sun Vo. Sun, I'll let you kind of take it away and introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, my name is Sun Vo. Currently I am a commercial realtor at Portal Real Estate here in Gainesville, Florida. I'm also a Chamber of Gainesville, am I saying that right?
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce,
Gainesville.
Gainesville. Diplomat and a part of the leadership board for the Gainesville Young Professionals as well. Previously, I was the owner of Swamp Boil, the only Viet Cajun restaurant here in Florida, in Gainesville. And so I made my transition now into commercial real estate, and I'm pretty active here in the startup community, the community as a whole, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, so Sun, we'll go back a little bit
because
I know you kind of grew up here, went to college here, and have just stayed here.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a super unique case because majority of the people that we all have on here have traveled to Gainesville at some point in their life and then stayed. So I would love to kind of hear about what it was like growing up in Gainesville and like transitioning into UF and then outside of UF, like getting into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Like, what was that transition like?
Yeah. So growing up here, honestly, Gainesville is a really great place to raise a family. There's a super tight-knit community here, and everybody's super supportive of each other. So especially when I was going into my entrepreneurial journey and even starting the restaurant, that was very prevalent because I was able to communicate with people very well and ask for help, whereas I feel like in many other cities where it could be a lot more cutthroat, people wouldn't provide that assistance, right? But here is, very much so. So my entrepreneurial journey kind of began in college after I started, this was my junior year at UF, and we did something called Startup Weekend. It was a weekend, so we pretty much had like 52 hours or something like that to pretty much get a group together. They did a little orientation, and then you found people around you, and you had literally 52 hours or that weekend to create a concept, prototype it, and then pitch it to a set of investors. So that whole process, from idea stage to pitching to investor, I fell in love with the whole entrepreneurial process. And then so from there, I just got very involved in the startup scene, joined the entrepreneurship club, and just kind of continued to be a serial entrepreneur. Yeah.
Right. So I know in college you were a part of the founding group of 161, which then turned into Accelerator and is now a current venture capital firm. Did that stem from the startup weekend? Like, how did that kind of come to be?
Yeah, so that came to be, the founding members, like me, Pablo, Justice, Isaac, and a few other guys, we all mostly met through the entrepreneurship club. And then from there was an evening where our mentor, Marty, he was with one of us, I can't remember, but then he invited us to join him for a cigar and a bottle of whiskey on the roof of the Holiday Inn. And I still have that bottle because we have a tradition where at the end of our events, we sign them, right? Mm-hmm. So I still have that original bottle of Woodford Reserve where we all signed. But that right there is what started it all, right?
Okay.
We just sat down, hung around. Marty is, a phenomenal entrepreneur. He's a professor at UF now, and he just wants to give back. And so he was telling us stories of him and his friends where they had a group called Empty Bottle Club, and that was the beginning stage of our group too, 161, Empty Bottle Club, where they would get together, have cigars, have whiskey, and the whole story was they were doing that, and then one of the guys was diagnosed with a terminal illness.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was like, you know what? We have all these really nice bottles. They're just going to go to waste when we're gone, right? So why don't we, on occasions, get everybody together, empty a bottle, enjoy each other's conversations, company, things like that. And, at the end of it, we sign it, give it to somebody special. But in that way, we kind of cherish these kind of moments together, kind of, put a lot more intention with the meetings. And so that we kind of took that concept and grew it in the entrepreneurial world, because there's so much connection here in town and in many other spheres that a lot of people work in silos and they don't communicate and connect with each other. So
Yeah.
we want to create that ecosystem to foster that connection between different groups and things like that. So
Yeah, I love the community aspect of that. I mean, I definitely feel like, even now it's still something that Gainesville among the student community lacks a little bit.
Right.
Like it's tough to find other entrepreneurs that have similar mindsets to you, because, they either are scared someone's going to steal their idea,
Right,
or
right.
they think they're smarter than
Right.
any other entrepreneur in the area.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend to like current students who are potentially looking at building that similar type of community?
Yeah. What did we do? We just pretty much went to events, and then we saw a gap, and we had a great group of guys that we, just wanted to kind of, we saw a gap in just like any entrepreneur, right? We wanted to fill that.
Right.
But in terms of general, just, when you find like-minded people, be intentional about the connections that you make, and it's just like reach out to them.
Yeah.
Like grab a coffee, grab a drink, and then just keep fostering that. And then eventually you could grow that. It's like, hey, have you met this person? Have you met this? Whenever I'm networking or connecting, my intention is to see how can I help the other person, right? And it's like from that, it becomes a very natural way of, networking, because like I have no ulterior motives. It's like, how can I help you? And that is my motive, right? And I may mention what I'm doing right now, and then from that may lead to another connection. But overall, it's the whole sense of community again, right? It's just get out there, go to events, connect with people, make these connections, and stay in contact with them, and
Yeah.
see how you can help. Because the saying goes, right? It's like when the tide rises, all ships rise.
Yeah.
So as long as you grow, like we all grow.
Yeah.
So
No, being intentional is a really good one. I feel like, the state the world is in right now is just a lot of copy paste LinkedIn
Yeah.
cold reach out messages saying like, hey, I really think XYZ is cool. Like let's hop on a call. So I definitely appreciate that insight. So now moving away from first of all, where did the name 161 come from?
Yeah, I literally remember the brainstorming session. It was on my front patio. But 161 is the Fibonacci number. So it is the golden ratio, which is like the way that nature grows most efficiently naturally.
Okay.
Right. So you see the spirals with the nautilus, with flowers and things like that. And so that is a number. I believe it's phi that signifies the golden ratio.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. So now moving off of 161, you said you ultimately left that project to be able to grow and build Swamp Boil.
Right.
How did Swamp Boil come about, and what was its opening phases?
Yeah. So Swamp Boil was a family project, and my family is also quite entrepreneurial. We own the shopping plaza that it's in, and so there was a vacancy there since obviously when we opened the plaza back in 2013, 2014. My mom's nail salon is there, and so every single time she would go to Orlando to pick up nail salon supplies, we would stop by a Vietnamese Cajun place called King Cajun that we loved, right? We always got their crawfish boils. We loved the sauce, and we're like, why do we have to drive 2 hours to do this, right?
Yeah.
So we tried making the sauce at home. Eventually, we got really successful at it, and we already had really good pho, really good, banh mi's, a lot of really good Vietnamese cuisines already. So we had that spot, and this concept didn't exist in Gainesville, and it's perfect for game days, large celebrations, graduations, etc. So we're like, let's figure this out. Maybe we can do this. So that was in 2018. My family came to me and was like, son, can you do this?
Yeah.
At the time, I was doing real estate. I was doing my startups, and so it was more so a family project. It was not something that I ever had an intention of ever starting a restaurant.
Yeah.
But as the universe says, just kind of let go and see where it goes, right?
Right.
So I did that. We started the project 2018, opened October 12th, 2020. Obviously, COVID hit. So we stopped, our construction, opened up in the worst time to start a restaurant in the history of ever. And then we did it. So we became one of the best restaurants in town. I believe we got voted by 352 magazine as like best Asian in the area. And yeah, we became like a fan favorite. It was definitely a hard business. So
Yeah.
like I said, I never intended to be a restaurant, but I remember when I was going out there and asking other restaurateurs about, advice to start a restaurant. I think it was Hero or somebody from Dragonfly, but
Yeah.
I remember they were like, "Why?" I'm starting a restaurant. They're like, "Why?"
Right.
I was like, "It sounds fun." And it's like, okay. It was fun. It was very fulfilling, but it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And like since my heart wasn't fully in it, and I wanted to do more entrepreneurial things, it was very taxing on me. Overall, it's already taxing, but it was a labor of love. But then eventually it got harder and harder. The economy hit, the recession hit, and then this past year in 2023, money wasn't there, and so we're like, you know what? Let's close while we're ahead. I had a whole rebrand planned out, but like, how long are we gonna push this along until it would fail or whatever else may happen. So
Right.
my heart wasn't in it anymore. The family didn't want to do it anymore. So at that point, we were just like, let's get out of it. That's when I started doing commercial real estate, and it was a perfect segue because the first business I was able to sell was Swamp Oil.
Nice.
Yeah.
It definitely kind of got you your first rep in
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
in that realm.
And from that, built a lot of reputation throughout town and everything as well through Swamp Oil. So it was a blessing.
Yeah. One thing I definitely wanted to ask about Swamp Oil that you touched on a little bit is because typically, when you think about starting a restaurant, right, you just think if it's good food, it's going to sell.
Right.
But I have to imagine that there is so much like behind the scenes,
Oh, yeah.
actual business dev that like
Yeah.
goes into it. I would love for you to share some insight kind of in that realm because it's definitely more of a unique perspective, right? Because one, it's not just as simple as making good food, right? You can make good food, but if you're not building the restaurant in
Correct.
the right way, it's going to be empty. Like I'm sure we've all experienced this. You walk into a restaurant and it's like empty, thinking that, wow, am I about to get like food poisoning? And then it's like
Yeah.
one of the best meals you've ever had.
Right.
Say, how is this place empty?
Yeah.
So what kind of went into like the business dev side of Swamp Oil?
For me, I'm a big culture person. So like the culture was what I kind of created first. I mean, obviously the build out, I put a lot of love and attention in the build out itself, but the culture was what I think is the foreground of everything else. Really creates that foundation. So since I didn't know anything about restaurants, I did it as if it was a startup, right? So, I had a vision board in the restaurant so that my employees could see what they're working towards every single day. People wanted to like, go to South America, buy a van, like do certain things and travel and a bunch of other goals. And people achieved these goals, and the culture, like there was a very prominent why in the business, and we even wrote this whole manifesto that I wrote, and we have 4 core values, right? Hospitality, integrity, growth, and community. And everything we did, and our messaging is always surrounded by that. So the community was a big thing, and then it was just leadership too. So I was very transparent. It's like, hey, if I don't know something, like I have managers who do so. So I hired people who are better than me
Yeah.
and smarter than me at what they did, right?
Right.
I might have the entrepreneurial skills or the business sense, but I was like, yo, like they're better at me, they're smarter at me in this. Even with my employees, like actually, I don't know. Like, what have you done before? And I asked my managers afterwards to double check with that. But also just kind of building that sense of communication, trust. That's how I built loyalty in my employees. That's why even when we were closing, everybody was super sad, but like we understand, and they stuck with me till the end. There's no hard feelings. I helped them get jobs elsewhere, and so it was just all love at that point. But it was very intentional and very vulnerable in terms of how I ran it.
That self-awareness, especially as like a younger entrepreneur, is pretty impressive. I mean, like I've found myself almost, fighting, asking for help, or saying similar things because I just, I feel like if I don't know, I should figure it out on my own.
Right.
How would you say, kind of growing up like in a family that was super entrepreneurial, would you say that definitely helped like tailor those skills like from an early age? Or is that just always kind of how you've looked at leadership? Because it's
Yeah.
like there's the leader, and then there's the leader who's also a manager and is
Right.
like directing people. It sounded like you were much more of like a leader where
Mhm.
you're collaborating with the
Right.
pieces that are around you.
Yeah, because I think a belief of like a good leader is like someone who makes other leaders,
Right.
right? Like, like a good leader makes more leaders.
Yeah.
I think I learned that from just experience throughout time. And, my family raised me really well and just like respectful of others and really hardworking. But I think, a lot of these different skills, like I learned from Marty, I learned from other mentors that I've had in my life, obviously consuming, content. But it's just like, like just in practice too. It's just like the understanding that the more that I knew how much I didn't know, right? And it's just like I never want to be the smartest person in the room, and I also want to build others up. So
Right.
it's just like kind of that understanding. It's like it's okay to be wrong, and you're not going to be the smartest person in the room, nor should you be, in my opinion,
Yeah.
because you want to surround yourself with other great people and build that way. Because I want to constantly be growing,
Yeah.
right? And so kind of that intention of constantly be growing and also being open to learning more is kind of what allowed me to be as vulnerable and open as I was as a leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's that's great insight. I mean, I've had like the opportunity to talk to like CEOs of like very successful companies, and one of the biggest pieces of advice that they give me is if you are the smartest person on your leadership team,
Right.
your company's going to fail.
Right.
So it's really cool seeing that actually played out like in a real time
Yeah.
example. So going toward the end of Swamp Boil and pivoting to where you are now, which is mainly focusing on commercial real estate, like what was like the thought process of going from building something like 161 to then almost doing like a complete 180 and
Right.
building a restaurant, and then
Yeah.
I would say it's almost like another 180 because we're going from the food industry to managing real estate. Like
Right.
where does that shift come from?
So yeah, I've been doing real estate since 2016, then took a break on that.
Okay.
So what I saw Swamp Oil as was a crash course boot camp in business and entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So restaurants are three businesses in one, right? They're a manufacturing facility, which is the kitchen. You have inventory, you have vendors and things like that you have to deal with, right? Two, you have customer service, which is front of house to the bar, customer service, dealing with customers, etc. And then you have HR, which is the inner kind of minglings of people and managing and delegating people, which
Right.
that was the hardest one,
Yeah.
surprisingly, right?
Yeah.
So the crazy thing about a restaurant, though, all three businesses, all three entities of it are going on all at one time, right? So at any given time, I had to solve problems real time. I had to deal with people. I had to be patient. I had to show leadership skills. I had to, understand the mechanics. I had to, do logistics. So every single thing that, let's say, a C-suite of people would do, you have to do finances, like you have to do as one person in a restaurant and all ongoing at one time. So if anything goes wrong, everything else trickles off. If a
Right.
cook doesn't show up, then the food is slow. Now customers are pissed off. Now, employees are yelling at each other. So at any given time, one thing doesn't happen, everything can go to, crap.
Yeah.
So from that, I also understand that I like building. So the building of Swamp Oil, the brand, the marketing, everything in terms of the building aspect, I love building. Same thing with 161, right? I got to work with very intellectual people, very inspiring people, and we got to build a community, help build businesses, things like that. The segue to commercial real estate, aside from doing residential like I used to, was the fact that I saw from my now mentor, Teresa, you could literally help build a community and an economy. Like in commercial real estate, like our firm is actually the property management of Alchemy, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So it's like we were driving around. She was like, I helped put them there. I know the owners of that. I put those companies there. I'm working on putting something there right now. And it's just so cool to see that she was able to be so tapped into the community and understand the landscape of it, who to talk to, who to communicate to make things happen. And, since I've been here for all my life, like most of my life, I love Gainesville. I think it's a very special place, and I want it to grow, but I don't want to lose its soul.
Right.
So the fact that I have an intentional say and play on what is coming here, how the economy is going to be affected, how the community is going to be affected, that was really cool for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I know like you may honestly have like a little bit of a different perspective on it, because you said at the start you're like a diplomat in the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
Do those kind of like work in tandem in this aspect of
Absolutely.
you're growing like the business economy almost like directly through both being a diplomat
Yes.
and managing the real estate? Can you kind
Absolutely.
of like talk about that
Yeah.
relationship?
So I got really involved with the chamber back in Swamp Oil days, and I honestly love it, because there's a lot of leaders in the community there, and a lot of obviously a lot of business owners, and so I get a really good pulse on what's going on, what are the needs of certain industries and certain businesses. So that works in tandem, like side and side with commercial real estate, right? So like if I have we have a parcel out in Alachua right now. It's like I could hit that number. It's like, does anyone look to expand? I've gotten listings from networking events that I've gone through the chamber or people I've met through the chamber.
Right.
So just both of them go hand in hand, because within my style of like marketing or networking, like that's how I get most of my business, is person to person kind of communication and connection.
Relationships are huge.
Yeah, relationships, exactly. And so, yeah, for me, it goes hand in hand. And the more people I meet, the more people I can help. And now I have a really cool way of, facilitating help through, commercial real estate.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're getting to our time here, but I want to ask, one more question. Where do you see commercial real estate like going, and like how, playing a part in your life? Like how do you want to use commercial real estate specifically in the near future, and then also maybe, 3 to 5 years down the line?
Yeah. So right now, since I've just started like a month ago, I am in the learning mode right now. So
Right.
for the first year or so, like I just want to learn as much as I can.
Yeah.
And then obviously help build Gainesville as much as I can. And then also, we just bought some property in St. Pete, and I might want to go down to that market someday. So my personal why is to help people feel connection and love through created experiences. Right. So that is broad enough where I can do whatever. Swamp Oil was a created experience, right?
Right.
And so with commercial development, if I go into development eventually, I could, build spaces. I could build whole plazas with certain businesses and kind of tailor it to a whole experience. Or I could build, hotels, or, now I have this new goal of like being a part of a development that is a piece of the skyline in some city. I think that'd be very cool.
Awesome.
Whatever that may look like, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I just want to continue to develop these cool experiences, cool spaces that facilitate connection and love, right? Whatever that may look like. That could be festivals, that could be a venue, that could be a cool office space, that could be whatever. But I just want to continue building and, continue with that mission.
I love that. And I love your why. What was it one more time?
Yeah, my why is to help people feel connection and love through created experiences.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great note to end on. So really appreciate you answering, all
My
the
pleasure.
questions I've had.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is fun.
We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. We'll clap it up for Sun.
Thank you, guys.